All right, Nathan, let's start with Justin Fields, because Justin Fields and CJ Stroud were both making the rounds at Super Bowl Media Week. And one of the other, it was a talking week. The week before the Super Bowl is a great time to talk football. And one of the things was that Matt Nagy, the fired Bears coach from 2 seasons ago now, was talking, and he did an interview and basically said, hey, we kind of messed it up with Justin Fields, but I thought they used him more effectively in the first year of Matt Eberflus and whoever Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator. And you saw the way the Bears did unlock Justin Fields as a runner to a much greater degree in his second year in the league. And I did think, Nathan, and again, this is playing off the Super Bowl a little bit, I think there is just a lot to learn for the way the Eagles brought out the best in Jalen Hurts and what Justin Fields could be. Now, as we said, Jalen Hurts put passes on guys' hands all game in the Super Bowl, and then also would just run QB power and QB counters. And here's the snap, here's a 1 second hesitation, here's the ball tucked in my elbow, and away I go. And I think Justin Fields is more dynamic than Jalen Hurts as a runner, although Jalen Hurts is very good. Jalen Hurts I think Jalen Hurts is kind of in between JT Barrett and Justin Fields. There's maybe a little more straight power to it, where Justin, I think, can really put on the jets and put some moves on people. But the balance, Nathan, the balance of how dangerous Hurts is in both aspects of the game, and that the Eagles in the Super Bowl and all year were not afraid to use that, the way they used him on quarterback sneaks, the way they used him as a get-out-of-jail-free card on third down sometimes, some of the deep shots they take, right? Again, that ball to A.J. Brown for the touchdown. I just watched Jalen Hurts, and while absolutely admiring every part of his game, and then his leadership and the person he is and the way his college career went and how his NFL career started and where he is right now, I think you admire Jalen Hurts from his eyebrows to his toenails. That guy is, I think, exactly what you want as a person and with the skills he has as a thrower and a runner in the NFL. But I don't think I watched Jalen Hurts, Nathan, and see anything that I don't think Justin Fields can't do. Now, I think maybe Justin has to pull a little bit more out of himself as he grows in the league as a leader, as the face of the franchise. I think Justin's just low key. Jalen Hurts is low key. But I just think maybe Justin has to keep pulling that out of him. But what his skills are, I hope the Bears watch every Eagles game 100 times from this season. And the question that we have here as the headline of the podcast is, can Justin Fields be a Super Bowl quarterback? I don't want to make it this easy, Nathan, but part of my answer is if Jalen Hurts can do it, I think Justin Fields can do it. And that's not to say they're exactly the same.
Right.
But it is to say they are, I think, even in a league where guys run more, I think they also are a little bit rare, maybe in how similar they are, because I think both Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson aren't as good throwing the ball. They're a little inaccurate compared to, I think, what Jalen Hurts is and what Justin Fields can be and has been at times. And I think Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are a little more oh my gosh, here they go. You don't exactly know what's going to happen when they run, but it has a chance to be spectacular. And I just could see Jalen Hurts was more like a machine, bang, 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 bang. And I can see Justin, while being spectacular, being that kind of quarterback with the right system, and also get him receivers like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, which would go a long way.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Watching Hurts, I thought a lot of Fields.
Well, yeah, so did I. And that was exactly the analogy I was going to make today. Here's some numbers. Jalen Hurts in 2021, so this would have been his second year in the league, 61.3% completions, 7.3 yards per attempt, 16-9 touchdown to interception ratio, and an 87.2 quarterback rating. Justin Fields' second year in the league, 60.4%, so less than a percentage difference. 7.0 yards per attempt, so 0.3 of a yards difference. 17 to 11 TD interceptions, so compared to 16 to 9, very similar ballpark, and an 85.2 rating compared to 87.2. So, like, not that far off, really. And Jalen Hurts coming into this year, I think, was still thought of as a certainly not a project, but a what do you want to say? Like an aspiring talent, like someone who was still on his way up. He wasn't there yet. He wasn't a finished product. He wasn't someone that thought was necessarily a Super Bowl quarterback at that point. But you can see the progression that Justin Fields is on. Now, there are there's one huge difference between the two, and it's something that neither one of them could control. Jalen Hurts came into the league as a second-round pick. The Eagles just used a normal second-round pick on him in the normal process of rebuilding their team after I think they were like 9-7 in 2019, so they weren't a terrible team at that time. They did only win 4 games the next year, but you know what I mean? Like it was whereas the Bears were already not a good team and then had to trade up to get Justin Fields. So they were already a team that was compromised and then using draft capital to trade up and get him. And I said at the time, that's what, as someone who followed the Bears growing up, I'm worried about that for Justin Fields because I think it's going to take them longer to crawl back up because the talent just isn't around him. And now you can look, they need help in so many different areas, including those playmakers. But Justin Fields also does need to get better on his own in some things. His pass grade per PFF, if you're judging just based on like the guys in the top who had at least 50% of their team's dropbacks, was 24th just in the basic grade. That's not great. His turnover worthy plays was highest in the NFL. Again, just going by the PFF stats that they have. His big time throws was 19th. His adjusted passing percentage was 22nd. So he needs to improve as a passer. And one of the ways also he needs to improve as a passer is, as much as they need help on the offensive line for him, and they're going to get some, I think, in this draft. I think there's going to be some Ohio State names that could be interesting to think of in terms of the Bears in this draft. But his time to throw was 3.45 seconds, first in the NFL. But I don't think that's it isn't because his offensive line was deceptively good. It's because of one of the things that we've always talked about with Justin Fields is he holds the ball a lot. And there's times where he needs to get rid of it faster. I think that number needs to come down, maybe counterintuitively. That number needs to come down a little bit because it's not necessarily a reflection of how your offensive line is doing all the time. So he needs to improve as a passer, but there also is so much reason for optimism because the floor maybe is a little bit higher. It's not like he's a catastrophe out there as a passer right now. He needs to refine some things, and as the rest of that team comes together, that's where you can see him then be able to take advantage of him. Because with the Eagles, it's not like Jalen Hurts has to go out there and put the team on his shoulders and carry them necessarily. Like, he does a great job as a runner, but how many times, like, his highlights as a runner were like finishing off drives as that team can like progressively make its way. Like, you need to see more of that from the Bears, where Justin Fields doesn't have to run the ball 50 yards to facilitate a touchdown drive, but maybe use him around the goal line as a real weapon after you've had a more conventional drive to get there.
I think the Bears would be a great team to sort of adopt what the Philadelphia plan is, which is we sort of don't punt, because when you have a quarterback like that on third down who can get out of trouble and prevent you from taking a big sack, and you can just be sort of, again, like, just keep moving the chains. And then when you get to fourth down, you have a big, powerful quarterback who can sneak it. You get that push. I mean, it just feels like the Eagles are playing a different game than a lot of other people, that they're just like, oh, no, we get 4 downs, you get 3. And it just changes the whole vibe of the game. And I would adopt that with the Bears, because I think Justin Fields can be that kind of thing. And then I think it gets you out of your head. On third down, for instance, you don't have to hold the ball and make a spectacular play. Take what's in front of you, because if it's 4th and 3 or shorter, we're going for it. Like, don't worry about. And now you don't want to take that I'm pro holding the ball. Joe Burrow holds the ball. Deshaun Watson holds the ball. Why do they hold the ball? Because they want to make something happen. So right. I don't want to take that out of Justin Fields. We talked about that a lot when he was at Ohio State. You're giving something up. He is not a get the ball out of his hands type of quarterback, because if you leave it in his hands for long enough, something absolutely amazing might happen.
It-
But you also are right. You need to balance that with a better offensive line without feeling like he has the entire burden of the offense on him, and hold it at the right moments for the right reasons. But as a team and as a young quarterback, to your point, I agree with you. They aren't there yet. I think he's still, even some of his spectacular plays in year 2 with as many yards as he ran for, sometimes like, well, if I don't do this, what else are we going to do?
Correct.
What's the other option?
Right. And there's a lot that goes into that number, time to throw, that I cited before. And one of the things is Justin Fields, when he was at Ohio State, it made every single time he held the ball that long, it probably made sense because the talent advantage that you had at receiver over the other team in almost every game he played in those 2 years at Ohio State was huge. Like, take away the playoff games, but in every other game, he had the advantage there. And in like 0 games in the NFL so far as he had that advantage. Like, his receivers just aren't upper tier receivers in the NFL. They're not getting open. So the Bears do have to upgrade there. And then there's going to be times where a play where he held the ball that long in his first 2 years in the league is going to look very different because of the guys he has out there who can get open. But let's also remember last night, the Eagles came into that game last night with the 3rd most sacks in the history of the NFL, behind the 84-85 Bears. And I thought the Chiefs did a really good job, for the most part, of getting the ball out very quickly. Not that isn't, I guess, they're some part of their game plan anyway. But, like, you've got to be able to have that in your bag, too. Those days when you're going against a team that is still going to have an advantage up front, how do you get the ball out from a passing standpoint and keep facilitating your offense?
The other thing I think here is I don't think the Bears can use the number 1 pick. They cannot use it.
No, they're trading.
They have to trade it. So every mock draft that has the Bears taking either Jalen Carter or Will Anderson, I just ignore because they can't do it. Because I'm just looking at what the Rams sent to the Titans for the 2016 draft, where they took Jared Goff, number 1, and the Titans got an extra 1, 2 extra 2s, and 2 extra 3s. To slide down from 1 to, I think they slid to 8, and then they traded down again, I think. So, like, that's one of those where, like, the Bears have to do that. There's not even a conversation, because there's 2 things the Bears are trying to do. Number 1, they're trying to win, but number 2, they're trying to figure out how good their young quarterback is. And Jalen Carter and Will Anderson is not going to do number 2, and I'm not sure it's going to do number 1. So the idea that you cannot take Jalen Carter when maybe you get 2 1s in this draft instead, and you take a receiver and an offensive tackle. That is what they should come out of this with. They should slide down, get 2 picks in this first round, and wind up with either Paris Johnson or Peter Skoronski, and then wind up with either Quentin Johnston or Jackson Smith-Njigba or Jordan Addison. They should get 2 of those 5 players. And then stockpile 2s and 3s also, because the other part of this is C.J. Stroud can help Justin Fields. Because the better C.J. Stroud looks, and the more it makes teams want to jump to get ahead of the Texans and maybe take their quarterback of choice at number 1, whether it's Stroud or whether it's Bryce Young. And there's just teams who are at 4 and 6 and 8 wanting to get ahead of each other. The better C.J. Stroud looks, the more it seems like there are multiple franchise quarterbacks in this draft, the more valuable that Bears pick becomes. But for Justin Fields, they cannot use it. They cannot take a defensive player number 1 overall. It would be nuts to me.
So there's a scenario that I think would make a lot of sense, which is the Colts trading up to 1. Colts have number 4. If the Colts did that, the Bears could trade down from 1 to 4, and then possibly still get Jalen Carter or Anderson. But Carter's the one that they've been maybe a little bit leaned more towards from the discourse you're hearing right now. That, I think, would be okay. I think that could be still defensible depending on what other picks you're getting along with that. But in general, I agree with you that taking – I like Jalen Carter a lot. I like Will Anderson a lot. I don't think I would – what you would be gaining from them compared to what you'd be giving up in draft capital with so many needs across that roster, it would be like borderline indefensible. But of course they have to posture that right now, right? They have to get it out there through channels that maybe they would just do that because that's part of the negotiation. All of this is back channel stuff. I mean, I don't know if people know this. You go to pff.com/mock, I think is what it is. And they have a great mock draft thing there where you can make trades for picks and trade picks into the future and stuff, and you can really get lost in that for a while. And there's a great Bears fan fiction thing where you could do where, oh, well, maybe you convince the Titans that they have to, or the Texans that they have to trade up to 1. So the Bears trade back to 2, and then the Bears trade back again from 2 to 4. So now you stockpile a bunch of picks, and you could still get Carter or Anderson. I don't think that's likely, though. I think the most likely scenario would be either that thing at 4 with the Colts, or what you're talking about, which is they get an offer from Seattle at 5, or the Raiders at 7, or the Panthers at 9, that comes with just so much, like an offer they can't refuse, that they would do that and just trade back that far. And now you're not getting either of those top defensive guys, but you still have your pick of the best guys at some other really impactful positions, like offensive line, where you have Skoronski and Johnson, like receiver, although this isn't as top-heavy a receiver class as last year's was. So you'd have a ton of options, and you're picking up second and third rounders. It could be really valuable for a team that, again, just has so many needs.
All right, so this quarterback trade discussion leads us into C.J. Stroud. But before we leave Justin Fields, Nathan, you can interpret this however you want to. I guess the question is it will Justin Fields be a Super Bowl quarterback? Can Justin Fields be a Super Bowl quarterback? I think can is probably the better answer, because there are multiple quarterbacks. There are many quarterbacks in the league who can be Super Bowl quarterbacks. But like Josh Allen, I think, can be a Super Bowl quarterback. He has not yet been a Super Bowl quarterback. Although, frankly, actually, there's like still parts of Josh Allen that I'm like, well, I think the parts of Josh Allen that you still slightly raise your eyebrow at, or maybe one of the reasons he has not yet been a Super Bowl quarterback, because he's still just a little like when the chips are down, as he's going to make a killer turnover or miss a throw. He's spectacular in a lot of ways. But anyway, let's make it can. Can Justin Fields be a Super Bowl quarterback in your mind?
Sure. I mean, the Bears have had 2 Super Bowl quarterbacks in their history. One was Jim McMahon, who was a good player at BYU, and then was a fine player in the NFL, but I think is remembered more for like his swagger and his personality on that team than anything else. And the other was Rex Grossman, who, again, and in both of those scenarios, you had a quarterback who was fine. I'm almost a Rex Grossman defender. He was better early in his career than people remember. But they were drafted onto teams that were almost like championship teams intact. Do you see what I'm saying?
But is that a relevant comparison for Justin Fields? Because he was not drafted onto a championship team, and that was kind of getting at history.
That's what I'm getting at. That's why it's can instead of will, because it's going to be tough for him. You just look at historically, like in the recent history of the NFL, there's like basically 2 paths to doing this. You can either have a really strong team that has a quarterback on a rookie deal, and they capitalize on that, or because that's what the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes the first time. And then they paid him, and now he's Patrick freaking Mahomes, and he's that good that even if you're paying him $40 or $50 million a year, he's worth it. Like he is still, you're getting your cap chunk out of him. So the Bears could be in a really tough position where Justin Fields starts to play great, but he can't pull the rest of this roster up on his own, and then now you have to pay him, and it hamstrings your ability to finish off the project. That's still something that lingers in my mind as a problem for them. But I think I would say can still, because I think we haven't seen the best football out of him. And if they do this rebuild right, if they hit this year right, I think it could push them towards something like what the Eagles were able to do this year. Which
I think, even to me, is more important why they have to trade this number 1 pick, because you've got to get some extra 2s and extra 3s, because you can't turn this first-round pick, because of the things you're talking about, into 1 starter. You should turn it to 4 starters. 4 moderately played young starters, so that when Justin Fields is now getting to the point, and the other thing is, listen, you can, it's a 5th-year option, so he's only entering year 3. So they'll have him for year 3, year 4. You pick up the 5th-year option, that's year 5. Then you can franchise him you can still tag him for another year or 2. I agree with you, and I spent a lot of time with Baker Mayfield and the Browns about the clock of the rookie quarterback contract, but also it doesn't get crazy for several more years here for Justin Fields. But if you can pick up some guys, some interior offensive linemen, some linebackers. So, they traded Roquan Smith because they don't want to pay Roquan Smith $100 million a $100 million contract like Baltimore just did, right? They blew it on the Chase Claypool trade. The idea that they traded what is the first pick in the second round to get Chase Claypool, who was very But you look at the Eagles, I mean, I think if they draft a receiver and then go sign a veteran or go do something, what if they got, I mean, it doesn't have to all be Ohio State, but what if the Bears next year had Michael Thomas and Jackson Smith and Jigba? That sounds like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith to me, a version of it, right? That's not, again, they don't have to only be Ohio State receivers, but like you can flip it pretty quick, right? The Eagles blew it on the Jalen Reagor pick when they picked him instead of Justin Jefferson. And guess what? Like they're okay because they addressed receiver very aggressively and specifically, one in the draft, one by trading a pick to get a veteran. And Jalen Hurts had absolutely the two guys he needs. I think the Bears could flip their reality at receiver very quickly, and they could do it with this draft if they do it right.
I think you're right. I think that, though, better come also with Peter Skoronski or Paris Johnson Jr., or they need offensive line help to maximize what they can maybe do offensively. But there's a lot of places they can upgrade on offense. Quarterback is one of the few positions that the Bears cannot upgrade offensively.
Okay, so I will agree with that. I think Justin Fields can be a Super Bowl quarterback with his skill set, with, I think, the improvement that he will show. I think the type of person that he is, again, he's a little bit low key, but I think the things you read coming out of Chicago, and it's almost been, I think, reaffirming, Nathan, that there is this, it's more of an analytical discussion, and the analytics people who I respect, I think, would say, and Jalen Hurts is the example. It's like, well, you think you have a quarterback, but take another one to make sure you have a quarterback. The Eagles thought they had a quarterback with Carson Wentz, and then they took one anyway. Now, they didn't take it number one overall. They took him in the second round. But then when Carson Wentz flamed out, they're not searching. They had a guy right there. So there are people who would say, take Bryce Young and have Bryce Young and Justin Fields, and then see who the best one is, and then trade the other one. That's not going to happen. That is sort of a theoretical discussion that the NFL is just not at that point. Yeah, the Cowboys did it 30 years ago with Steve Walsh and Troy Aikman, but nobody's going to do it now. But I do think the idea of should you trade Justin Fields and draft a quarterback, that is more at least realistic. I don't think that's impossible, but it feels like that discussion, the organization has rallied it. Now, well, of course, what are they going to say? And if maybe Justin Fields is traded by the time this podcast comes out, but I don't think they are. I don't think they're blowing smoke. And what it's caused, Nathan, is for this team and this organization and everybody around it, from the owner to the GM to the coach to the players on the team, to say, no. This is our guy. So maybe going into year three, when you were just coming off you're the worst team in the league. And what has happened? Because of this theoretical quarterback discussion, the Bears have very publicly and clearly rallied around their current quarterback to say, no, he is it. And I think that can be really good. I'm not saying that Justin Fields needed it, because I don't think Justin Fields is a noise guy. I think Justin Fields is I'm on my couch with my dog and I'm studying the playbook and I'm good to go guy. But it's kind of a nice thing. So it feels like Chicago is all in on Justin Fields. And if you give him help and real support, and you call good plays, I'm not saying the Bears are going to be a playoff team in 2023, but I think we could see what this real version of Justin Fields can be sooner than later, which goes back to the Hurts comparison that you started this with. That again, like this was a step for him, and maybe he's ready for a really big step in year three.
And I was sort of ready for them to publicly let him dangle a little bit more publicly, because he isn't a noise guy. I agree with you. And you could go to him privately and say, like, hey, listen, you know how this game is played. We need this number one pick to have as much value as possible. If people think we might take a quarterback with it, it makes it more valuable. We can go get more guys to help you. So just don't listen to what you're hearing out there. Pay no attention. Like, you're our guy, but we need to let this buzz build a little bit. But they didn't do that, and I think there's value to that as well. And the other thing I will say is this Bears the Claypool decision does give you pause, but it's also not the Bears ownership or leadership group that traded up and historically bad to get Mitch Trubisky. It's not the one even that then had to kind of counter that by trading up for Justin and trading away capital. Like it. So this is this group's chance to like maybe take a better swing and get things going in the right direction. So giving them the benefit of the doubt that with their first shot at this, that maybe they'll correct some of the past mistakes.
All right, that's 2 votes for yes, Justin Fields can be a Super Bowl quarterback. Next, can CJ Stroud? We'll do it after this break on Buckeye Talk. All right, Doug and Nathan are back, 614-350-3315. I have a plan for Valentine's Day. Well, I'll tell you it. And I'm going to send it out to the texters. So this is the kind of thing that texters get to do. If you want to be a tech subscriber and get a 2-week free trial, 614-350-3315. We're going to do anti-rants. And we're going to do what our tech subscribers love about Ohio State football and or being an Ohio State football fan. So it is anti-rants. We are expressing love, believe it or not, on Buckeye Talk. That will be the Tuesday pod on Valentine's Day. CJ Stroud, windows. There's the size of a contact lens in the NFL, especially in the Super Bowl. And I think that potentially will bring out the best of CJ Stroud and all the things. It's a brain conversation. We had 2 years of brain conversation, especially in the second year as a starter with CJ Stroud. But there is a very true, I think, and real accuracy conversation. There's the understanding. There's understanding of what a defense is doing to you and what your offense is trying to accomplish. And once you have the understanding, that leads to anticipation. And okay, I'm going to throw where the thing is about to happen. And then when you have anticipation, that should allow you, if you then have also the physical skills, to be accurate in making throws in windows that are not even there when you are throwing them. And I think, Nathan, it is possible. I don't think this is. There are people on Twitter, the draft analyst people, and there are a million of them now. You can just go through Twitter and you can start to see people are starting to break down the film. And there are people who are starting to say, ho, this CJ Stroud guy. And I think in the end, that is going to be the film itself. 2 years of it is going to be CJ's best attribute in this process. I think he'll do fine at the combine. I think he'll do very well in interviews. I think when he throws at the combine, if he throws at the combine, maybe if he doesn't throw there, he'll throw at pro day. But that's all on air, right? I don't think any of that is going to show CJ's best attributes. His best attributes have been on film for the last 2 years. But I do think putting throws on guys' fingertips time and time and time again, where we started this podcast, Nathan, when I watched that, I thought, that's what I think CJ can do. And so I am curious how this quarterback conversation will evolve. You have Bryce Young, who I think is monumentally poised in the pocket, but he is significantly smaller than CJ Stroud. And then you have 2 guys in Will Levis and Anthony Richardson that I just think are more athletes first. Mm-hmm. That they have that extraordinary Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Now, both of these guys are bigger, so I think they're both more Josh Allen types. Just big, like run you over, run through you, throw it a mile kind of stuff. And CJ's neither of those things. CJ's not too small. He's not too big. He's just right. He's the delicious, correct temperature porridge, which is very comforting. And I will be very curious to watch this quarterback evaluation evolve before the NFL draft in late April, Nathan. But when I watched that Super Bowl, I thought you need to hit small windows, and I think that's what CJ Stroud does better than anybody in this draft.
And again, I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about very early in this podcast with how Ryan Day selects a quarterback, develops a quarterback, the offense that he gets them to run. I think CJ is going to come into this, very well prepared. And I know that there are some things, as far as his mobility that is going to get questioned. I think he showed in the Georgia game where he could go with that. But that's not the baseline of where he can succeed in the NFL. I think he has, as much as any of these guys, proven with his performance that he's proven his NFL success baseline through his performance the last 2 years. Like the things that he would be asked to do the most in the NFL, he has shown he can do. I think as much or more than Young or those other guys you were talking about.
So then it becomes a situation of, Justin Fields got put into not a great situation with the Bears, and it wasn't ready for him when he got there. And so then the coach got fired. And then once you have the quarterback, then you can try to hire the people around the quarterback. So they hired a defensive head coach, but then brought in a quarterback's guy to run the offense and hopefully get the best out of Justin Fields. CJ Stroud, where he goes, I think it is going to matter to him. And just like I thought it mattered to the late, great Dwayne Haskins, that I think he got thrown into a mess with Washington, with Jay Gruden and a head coach who I think in the end, maybe it wasn't the quarterback that Jay Gruden wanted, but I think Jay Gruden was doing a bad job in Washington and was on his way out anyway. And Daniel Snyder is a mess. That entire organization was a mess.
Yep.
And we never, I think, got to see the best of Dwayne. And then he went to the Steelers, and again, before his tragic death, was a backup quarterback. I don't know what the rest of his career held, but I think there's a version of the career we did see from Dwayne Haskins that would have been potentially quite different in a more stable situation. So I do think it's really going to matter to CJ Stroud where he goes. But I think in talking about this, Nathan, I think there are multiple good opportunities here. As you mentioned, I think the Colts are absolutely one of them. They have the 4th pick right now, and they are reportedly going to hire Shane Steichen, who is the offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles, as their head coach. It's like, oh, okay. Well, that seems like it could work. One of the other options, I think, is Carolina, who is currently number 9, who just hired Frank Reich, the fired Colts coach, who once upon a time was the offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles when they won their last Super Bowl, but again, is a quarterback guy, was a quarterback himself, is a quarterback developer. I think Carolina could be an interesting fit for him. Detroit, I think, is a real possibility for him as well. When you talk about teams that have multiple picks, Detroit right now has the 6th pick and the 18th pick. If the Bears are trying to get capital, it's like, hey, we'll take Detroit 6 and 18 plus other stuff for them to move up to number 1 and take the quarterback they want. Maybe it's Bryce Young. Maybe it's CJ Stroud. I do think Detroit could be in the mix for him. And then Houston, I think, remains in the mix because either maybe Houston would decide that Houston likes CJ Stroud better than Bryce Young, or they have the number 2 pick right now and somebody jumps them and takes Bryce Young. And now all of a sudden, not that they're left with CJ Stroud. And so they just hired D'Amico Ryans, who's a defensive coordinator, as their new head coach. I think that's a great hire for the Houston Texans. But I think that will matter to CJ. But I don't think it matters as much as it does to some of these specific quarterbacks with the running skills, where you saw the Ravens get the best out of Lamar Jackson. You saw the Eagles get the best out of Jalen Hurts. You saw the Bills get the best out of Josh Allen. You have to acknowledge what your quarterback skills are and then play to that. So I think with Justin didn't have that from the jump. I do think, as much as I'm saying I think it matters, I also do think CJ is going to be CJ. So I'm curious, but I do think if he goes somewhere where he basically has a Ryan Day type as his head coach, which I think Shane Steichen in Indianapolis could be, I think Frank Reich in Carolina could be, Dan Campbell with Detroit, I don't think is that. D'Amico Ryans with Houston, I don't think is that. It doesn't mean I don't think he can succeed with those guys, but I'm super curious to see how this works out, how good CJ looks, how much teams want to jump. But how do you think his landing spot matters to CJ's chances of being a Super Bowl quarterback?
I think it's potentially huge. I mean, I think it can happen regardless, but where would it happen the fastest? Like there was one team that, of all those that you rattled off, that I thought would be the fastest potential path to success for any number of reasons. And it was if he were to fall in this draft, which I don't know how likely that is, but there are people out there who seem to be enamored by Levis. There are people out there talking about Richardson. Like if he were to fall all the way to 9 to the Panthers, I think that could be like a kind of a jackpot thing. It would tick him off, first of all, to fall that far. And he's a guy who kind of has that in his motivation bank a little bit already, coming up short in the Heisman and those sorts of things. And it would also be closer to a team that has a foundation right now that's closer to ready to win. And then you throw the Frank Reich thing into it. I just think there's a lot of reasons why that would make sense. The Colts are a really interesting situation because they, for a while now, have been one of the better franchises in the NFL. Like, I mean, with Manning and Luck, and they've gone to a couple of Super Bowls and won one, and had kind of consistently in just these last few years, partially because they haven't been able to figure out quarterback. They've really drifted from that, and then things got really weird this past year with Irsay, the owner, and bringing Jeff Saturday in to be the coach. And so I'm very curious where they go from here, but they have to fix quarterback first and foremost, regardless of anything else going on. I don't think what goes on there is as bad as the kind of corrupt to its heart sort of thing that was going on with the Washington franchise. Things are just a little bit weird in Indianapolis, and I think fixing quarterback could help put that back on track. So they are still a team that I think he just makes a ton of sense for, either them having them fall into their laps at 4 and being satisfied with that, or maybe falling in love with him, seeing in him some of the things that you could say about, I'm not comparing him to Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck, who are both, especially Peyton Manning, but you see the passing skill that he has first and foremost. Would they fall in love with that to the extent that they would want to trade up and get him? Maybe.
In terms of teams that need quarterbacks, Bears at 1 don't. We said that. We think that's going to be a trade. Texans at 2 do. Arizona Cardinals at 3. You think they're still in with Kyler Murray. Colts at 4 do. Seattle at 5. I do think Seattle gets traded from the Broncos. I don't think that's a terrible spot where you would maybe ride with Geno Smith for one more year and like sort of tell CJ Stroud, okay, Geno's the guy for a year, but get ready. Like, you're going to be the starter in year 2. I don't think that's terrible. Detroit at 6, obviously do. The Vegas Raiders at number 7, they need a quarterback. Atlanta at 8, I saw somebody do that. They did just take Desmond Ridder in the 3rd round. I don't know if that would preclude them from taking a quarterback, so that's a maybe. Carolina at 9 absolutely does. And then the Titans at 11 and the Jets at 13, I think also need quarterbacks. The Jets at 11, that's Mike Vrabel. Excuse me, the Titans at 11, that's Mike Vrabel. And then the Jets at 13, that's Garrett Wilson and Jeremy Rucker. So it's like, you can find lots of things. But I would say my prediction that I will put down here right now is I think the first 2 picks in this draft are quarterbacks. So I think the Bears are going to make that trade, and then anybody trading up for that's trading up for a quarterback. And then the Texans are absolutely taking a quarterback. So then the question is, well, do you think the first 2 quarterbacks are going to be Bryce Young and CJ Stroud? Or for our audience, will CJ Stroud be one of the 2? I think he will. And I will be almost disappointed in the NFL if somebody Will Levises themselves into oblivion to take him early. And I don't really understand how the NFL makes decisions sometimes, because I think if you want the idea specifically of, I think having a quarterback who can run is a great bonus. And if you do it the right way, it can be a primary thing. It's really good. But especially if that guy's big and physical. I understand the idea that like Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray might make you a little nervous because they're a little bit smaller. So that's Justin. So the idea that somehow the Jets talked themselves into Zach Wilson and the Niners talked themselves into Trey Lance ahead of Justin Fields a couple drafts ago, when it feels to me like if people are going to fall, because if you're going to fall in love with Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, how could Will Levis or Anthony Richardson go higher than Justin Fields, who was doing it at the highest level with, I think, absolutely the same or better athletic attributes than Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, and he's a better thrower. So there's part of me of like, how could we get to a place where Justin Fields is the 4th quarterback off the board, but then Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, or one of them, goes ahead of CJ Stroud? Like, I don't know how that computes. Maybe the Jets were just idiots to take Zach Wilson. That might just be the conversation there. And the Niners outthought themselves, but then people thought Mac Jones. And again, I just thought Justin Fields was the 2nd best quarterback in that draft behind Trevor Lawrence. And I don't know. I think maybe this is proven out. So I will say, I think, Nathan, my bet right now is that CJ Stroud and Bryce Young probably Bryce Young 1, CJ Stroud 2, which becomes a CJ Stroud to the Texans conversation. Where you're saying, like, oh, he might be a Texan. There's a really good chance he's a Texan. A really good chance. Unless, and this would be the best thing for the Bears, get the Texans to fall in love with Bryce Young and be like, hey, we're going to trade the number 1 pick and you're going to miss out on Bryce Young. Make that trade and then make a second trade and then trade out of 2.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, CJ's going second, but not to the Texans. So my bet right now is they're the top 2 quarterbacks. If I had to bet right now, I'd say Bryce Young 1, CJ Stroud 2. If you had to bet right now, how do you think CJ fits into this?
I think the same thing right now. I do hold out that caveat that I think what you see happen, I think this definitely happened in 2021, where Lawrence was the one that had the least red and or yellow flags. Like, he was the one that just seemed like the most, not only was there a big ceiling, but a high floor for Trevor Lawrence. He just seemed like the most sure thing of that quarterback class. And then from that point on, it's how much you overthinking those flags with these other guys. And I think that happens every year. I mean, there's a lot riding on this, and teams just overthink this sometimes. I thought that definitely happened with Justin Fields, where you couldn't just look at him and say, look at this. I mean, just look at the package, like, and what he did. Like, it's teams definitely overthought that. So do I think that it's very much a possibility that someone will overthink this and look at someone like Levis or Richardson and be like, well, I know that he doesn't look as polished now, but that's why we want him, because we can get him into our system and make him even better. Like, I think that could definitely happen. But if I had to bet on it right now, I would say Young and Stroud 1, 2. And I'm glad you mentioned the Seahawks. That was a team that I had forgotten to mention, but they actually have, because of that trade with Denver, which looks not great right now for Denver, they have some extra capital to play with. And they're a team that could maybe move up from 5 to 2, not really take that big of a hit in terms of like their baseline draft capital that they have, and still get a pretty good quarterback like a CJ Stroud.
So Bobby Slowick has been hired as the Texans offensive coordinator. He's 35 years old. He was former passing game coordinator for the 49ers. Knows DeMeco Ryans from that. So that's who's going to be calling the plays with the Texans. I really do think, and we talked about this a lot on the CJ Stroud Legacy Pod, and if people haven't listened to that from a couple weeks ago, I still would direct people toward that. I don't know if I'd want to throw CJ Stroud into a 1-16 season. Like, if you are a bad team picking him, and like Detroit's trying to win. Detroit, like if it winds up in Detroit, they're ready to go. The Raiders, I don't think are tearing down to build back up. They just made a move on Derek Carr. I don't know that they're going down to the studs.
No, I think that was just a business decision.
You know, Seattle had a pretty good year this past year. So you think about the teams, and that's like the best thing that can happen is you have like a pretty decent team trade draft capital to jump to get you. So you go high, you get the extra money for going high. You don't have to fall, but then you're not on a terrible team. If I were the Texans, if the Texans take CJ Stroud, I think I maybe would start Davis Mills and just tell CJ, you're not starting this year. And I often am in favor of like, throw him out there, let him learn. The more you play, the better you'll get. I just think CJ, and we had this long conversation about CJ. I think we all like and respect CJ Stroud. I don't know that I'd want to throw him into 1-16 on a rebuild.
Right.
Just for his own like progression as a quarterback. And so if you have a first-year head coach, you have a new staff. Again, I think DeMeco Ryans is potentially a home run hire for the Houston Texans, but they're building something back up. If he winds up there to say, okay, you're good, but it's not, and plenty of teams have done this over the years, but it's not going to be you this year. Get ready for 24 to set the world on fire. I think that could be really good. If you go to Pete Carroll in Seattle, if you go to a Detroit team that almost made the playoffs this year, places like that, then I think, to your point, if you're dropping them into where there's structure built up around you, both from a coaching staff as the most important thing, but also from talent that you're on the field with, then okay. But don't send CJ Stroud out there to get sacked 60 times. Don't do to CJ Stroud what the Bears did to Justin Fields.
Right.
Because I do think just their personalities, I don't think Justin loved it, but I think Justin could go back with Uno, sit on his couch, break it down, no noise, be okay. I think it would be tougher on CJ. So I think that's something that teams have to take into account. But I think once CJ grows into it, I think CJ has a chance to be great.
Yeah, and listen, like the Bears did it with Justin Fields. He didn't start from day one. They had veterans in place to like ease him into that until it was obvious that it was time to just make that change. They weren't going to win anyway. Move forward with him.
The starter got hurt. He wound up starting week 3. He wound up starting like week 3.
But that wasn't the plan. It wasn't the plan for him to start early in his rookie year.
No, you're right.
And by the way, a little team called the Kansas City Chiefs drafted Patrick Mahomes, and he barely played his true rookie year.
Right.
So like it used to be the norm, right? Like growing up, we would the Bengals would draft Carson Palmer first overall, and they're like, okay, we'll see him in 2 years. Like there was just like no thought of putting him on the field as a rookie, and now it's completely flipped, and now it's almost the exception when you don't put him out there. But I think we've seen again, Mahomes is still the best example. Like the idea that like, and they had a proven veteran in place there, but still like to have that level of talent and not put it on the field right away, and to have it pay off this way is maybe going to make, it's a copycat league. So we'll see if some teams take a look at that and make that approach in the future too. But a lot of times though, again, when it's a really bad team, because the college game has advanced the way it has, I think it's just legitimate that sometimes these guys are coming in as rookies and they're just better than some of the retread garbage that you have on your roster already on a 2-14 team, and it makes sense to start them. But that's why a team like Seattle or maybe even Carolina would make some sense. Detroit, yeah, it would make some sense. I'm skeptical that the Bears would make that trade with Detroit. I don't know. We'll see. When you're trading within the division, would you still make that trade? It would have to be. You really have to be getting worth for it.
But first, man.
Yeah,
I'd do it.
Yeah, I probably would too.
So the idea of this. So do you think CJ Stroud can be a Super Bowl quarterback?
Sure.
Yeah, I think so too. I would say yes. And I do think there's some funny stuff. Again, you just go through Twitter. I saw like people making like CJ Stroud, Jalen Hurts comparisons, just like random people on Twitter. It's like, nope. What actually you would hope CJ can be is like if CJ does a little more of the off-platform stuff like he did against Georgia, it can be, something between like Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, right? Maybe a little more off-platform than Brady.
That's the.
But
is that all?
I'm talking.
I know.
Style of play, and again, because like CJ references Joe Burrow, but I actually think Joe moves a little bit better than CJ does. But if CJ moves, maybe 25% more than he did at Ohio State, and like Patrick Mahomes, now Mahomes had the big run, but typically Mahomes moves to throw, right? That's what he's looking to do. Hurts will run. Mahomes moves around and looks downfield. I think if CJ can do that, absolutely it could work. The windows. The idea of this, Nathan, for Ohio State fans, for the Ohio State football program, when you look at Ohio State quarterbacks in the NFL, I think people know this. We'll just do a brief reminder of this. Dwayne Haskins, 3 wins as a starting quarterback in the NFL before his tragic death. Cardale Jones, who I just thought there was like honestly, like talk about like a big physical quarterback who can run and throw the ball 100 yards down the field. What Josh Allen became in Buffalo, I thought Cardale Jones had a chance to become before Josh Allen got in the league. Like, I'm not sure. Like, it might be a little wild, but man, he might truck people and throw deep balls, and it just never happened. I really thought it had a chance to happen, and it would have looked a lot like Josh Allen did. So Cardale did not win a game in the NFL. Terrell Pryor, 3 wins as a starting quarterback in the NFL. Troy Smith, 4 wins as a starting quarterback in the NFL. Got mono in camp, got beaten out by Joe Flacco because he got mono, and then we saw what happened to Joe Flacco. I do think there is a version possibly of like, if Troy Smith doesn't get sick, that version of the Ravens, which was a defense-first team, could it be that Troy Smith is the quarterback of that team instead of Joe Flacco? I don't think it's 1,000% impossible. But again, Troy, smaller quarterback, kind of a specific thing you had to do there. The most wins, regular season wins for an Ohio State starting quarterback, 42 NFL wins for Mike Tomczak. Kent Graham had 17. Tom Tupa had 4. Bobby Hoying had 3. Like, there's 2 guys in double digits, Nathan, Mike Tomczak and Kent Graham. And Justin is 3-12, I think it is right now, as a starting quarterback in the NFL. So what would this mean? What could this be when, again, we watched the Super Bowl where the Ohio State wasn't really involved at all, but when Ohio State is involved at the highest level, it's defensive guys, it's receivers, it's Zeke in the backfield. Maybe there's, Taylor Decker's a good offensive lineman, that kind of thing. It's never been quarterbacks. What if Ohio State quarterbacks are finally good in the NFL, Nathan?
I think it could be huge, and not just with tangible reasons. Because look at every other thing that Ohio State has tried to be position you about. Like, edge rusher you, those guys get in the NFL and do legit things. Again, take us back to our Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa conversation that started this whole thing off. Cornerback you, those guys go to the NFL and have made an impact in the NFL. Wide receiver you're starting to see it in the NFL. I mean, Garrett Wilson, Rookie of the Year, Chris Olave having a huge year. Like, these guys are getting in the NFL an immediate impact in a star kind of way. I mean, Michael Thomas was like pound for pound the best player in the NFL, arguably, there for a year or two. But what does Ohio State really, really want to be right now? In kind of, I guess, a corollary to wide receiver you, they want to be quarterback you. Like Ryan Day's already said that. I asked him this question a couple years ago on draft day, I remember, about that correlation between having upper first round quarterback talent. And he's like, absolutely, like that's what we have to do. That's what this is supposed to be. We're sending guys to the Heisman Trophy ceremony, and they're early first round NFL draft picks, but they've also got to follow that up with the success. You can point to every other position and say, we are going to develop you, and you're going to go to the NFL, and you're going to be a star. And I think they've got to start doing that at quarterback for this to really hold up the way Ryan Day wants it to. It can't just be, college success. And that's why, frankly, you can look at someone like at Jalen Hurts and what that means for Lincoln Riley now can say, it's not just that I'm developing good college quarterbacks who put up college numbers and win the Heisman Trophy and have that little formula figured out, because we all know that that's not necessarily a harbinger or a predictor of pro potential. You'll also go to the NFL and you go to a Super Bowl. 3 years in, you're in a Super Bowl. Like that's a selling point now for every guy that he goes out and tries to recruit. Ryan Day doesn't have that in his holster yet, doesn't have that on his resume that he can say, I've developed quarterbacks who then go in the NFL and push teams to that, other than Joe Burrow. He can still say a little bit about Joe Burrow. He can still kind of use that example, but people are going to say, well, they have a comeback for that. He needs to develop the guy where there's no comeback. And some of that's out of his control. It's out of his control that the wrong team drafted Justin Fields potentially and wasn't in position to utilize him at first, and then now has to try to catch up and hope that it does so in the right time. And it's out of his control who drafts CJ Stroud and whether it's the right situation. But if you keep doing it enough, one of these guys is going to hit. And that's the first thing that is happening right now. It's happening with such regularity. They're just spitting out these first round guys. One of them's going to hit. One of them's going to make it. I mean, just look, you mentioned Joe Flacco. Look back over the past 10 years, because all we're saying is, can these guys quarterback in a Super Bowl? Like the list of guys who have quarterbacked in Super Bowl just the last 10 years. Start with Flacco in 2012, Matt Ryan, Nick Foles, who won, Jared Goff, Jimmy Garoppolo, Matt Stafford. They're not like going to go down as like all-time greats in the history of the NFL. You don't have now. A lot of times, the guys who win those are it's like Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes and guys who probably will go on that list. But you can get there as just being really good in the right situation, or just kind of catching lightning in the bottle sometimes.
So I will say the one guy, and I don't know that Ryan Day tries to claim this guy, but he has his signed jersey in his office, and it's Matt Ryan, from Boston College, because when Matt Ryan, I think, was like a freshman and maybe a sophomore, Ryan Day was a GA. And then Matt Ryan's senior year at Boston College, Ryan Day was the receivers coach. And so that's one of those. But I'm sure Ryan Day was like, hey, quarterback's room, you guys need any extra help over here? We're done. The receivers meeting is done. We're done over here if you want me to come in.
But he needs examples to point to that you don't have to squint to see. Right now, you kind of got to squint to see Joe Burrow's example. You really got to squint to see Matt Ryan. He needs that in your face, like, oh, you mean CJ Stroud that 3 years in, he just quarterbacked Carolina to the Super Bowl. Picked, developed, that's what he needs to really put a stamp on this.
We ended the meeting early. I mean, the receivers, we only went 25 minutes. I just told them, run their routes and put their hands up. Are you sure? I've got time. And then he wound up back at Boston College several years later as the quarterback's coach and offensive coordinator. It's always funny like that. I mean, these guys, they wind up. Stan Drayton was a running backs coach his whole life, came to Ohio State, was the receivers coach for a year. And guys move around, the whole game and that kind of thing. But it's like, did they get the best receiver play in the world that year when the running backs coach was trying to teach him how to run routes? Like, not that Ryan Day can't do it, but what do you think Ryan Day does better? Receivers coaching or quarterback coaching, right? So it's just funny to me to think of Matt Ryan was about to be a top 5 pick, and Ryan Day's in the building and is like, I'm not coaching that guy. No offense to these receivers, but why am I not coaching? I want to coach that guy. So anyway, now he gets to do that. Okay, that'll do it. That was long, but I think we wanted to talk about, this idea, because I think it is valuable. It's interesting for CJ and Justin and the fans, the Ohio State fans who have and always will care about them. But to your points, Nathan, it means something to Ohio State too. And wouldn't it be fun one year? I mean, we did no Super Bowls. I don't know, Trey Sermon and Justin Hilliard. We did can you imagine what we would do for a week? I think maybe we could get one of us to go.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think
if Justin Fields or CJ Stroud was in the Super Bowl, that is a huge stinking deal. And you know who else would be there? Ryan Day on Media Row, making the rounds, talking about the success, what a great player in person Stroud or Fields is. And by the way, I coach them, and I'm still at Ohio State, and boy, we're still looking for quarterbacks.
Have you noticed, you know who loves
be big for Buckeye Talk?
You know who loves Justin Fields is Michigan grad Rich Eisen. He's been talking him up all year, and he's a Jets fan, I think, and he's been as this rumor was going around about maybe the Bears would just trade Fields and draft a quarterback. He was like, get the Jets on the phone right now, trade up. Trade whatever you have to get Justin Fields. He's seen it in person now in a couple different ways. And then Justin Fields actually had a really great interview with him on Radio Row, I thought, this past week, talking about the Michigan rivalry.
Interesting. Someday Buckeye Talk on Radio Row at the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Although we hate radio. Well, not all radio.
Full circle.
Just morning zoo drive time. Okay. Thanks you guys for making Buckeye Talk part of your week. We'll do the anti-rant on Tuesday. We have a special thing coming. We're going to do a draft that Steven and Nathan and I have talked about. I'm really excited about. We'll do the first version of that draft later this week. Some other stuff percolating. As always, make sure you're reading cleveland.com/OSU. Try the text at 614-350-3315. And don't miss the College Football Survivor Show, where Shahan Jehiraja and I talk about National College Football twice a week. We now have 2 free episodes a week. That's starting this week. It used to be 1 subscription, 1 free episodes for the Survivor Show. Now both are free. So we'll see some of you guys over there. For now, though, for Nathan Baird, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Buckeye Talk.